Welcome back to another episode of A Pretty Lie Instead of an Ugly Truth. Now, before I begin with today's episode, I just want to give a disclaimer and state that this episode is going to be completely unorthodox, as the entirety of this video will be completely comprised of my personal opinions towards the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. For those of you who have been following this channel for quite some time, you know that I do my absolute best not to give my personal opinion in regards to the subject matter that we are exploring on this channel, as I genuinely want people to come to their own conclusions based off of the evidence that is provided. Today, however, I won't be following that decree, especially after seeing the presidential debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Now, before I continue, I just wanted to state that my target audience and the people who I will be focusing on for the duration of this film are Black people. And the reason that this video is targeted towards Black people is because, unbeknownst to them, the very political parties that they consecutively vote for have systematically destroyed their lives. Now, am I saying that if you're not a Black person, you can't watch this video? Of course not. What I'm saying is that my talking points will be specifically directed towards the Black community. So now that we got that out of the way, I want to share my thoughts in regards to both parties. The Republican Party and the Democratic Party insist that Black people should vote for them, as if voting is going to eradicate systematic racism and oppression. Let me ask all of you a question at home. Has voting for either party in the past stopped miseducation, aka Jane Elliott's #1 talking point? Has voting for either party in the past stopped racism in the workplace or the mass genocide of Black people? Has voting for the Republicans or the Democratic Party given Black folks fair access to wealth over the years? Has voting stopped gentrification? Has voting stopped redlining? The answer is hell motherfucking nah. In case you're not aware, Black people have been voting since the 14th Amendment, which was put into place on July 9th, 1868. Now, if you're not good with math, that's over 152 years that Black people have been voting for change, yet Blacks are worse off now than they've ever been before. The truth of the matter is, the Republicans and the Democrats don't give a flying fuck about you. They never have, and they never will. And that's a fact. For the last 100 years, neither party has ever produced a single agenda for Black people. Until this very day, neither party has a plan in place to stop the problems that I just mentioned. Yet the Democrats and the Republicans want you, aka the Black folks, to vote for them. You got to be out of your motherfucking mind. Why would any Black person vote for the same people who put them in the social economic situations that they are in today? Please explain that to me. Please explain that to me. Please explain to me why anybody would do that, family. Now, I know some people at home are going to say, well, Mr. Ages, I'm going to vote for Biden as he's the lesser of two evils. Mr. Ages, if you don't vote for Biden, then you'll be voting for Trump. And my answer to those statements is this. Is there a fundamental difference between the two? If we vote for Biden and put him into office, is Biden and the Democratic Party going to save Black America from police genocide, systematic racism, gentrification, redlining, and miseducation? Allow me to answer that for you in case you forgot. 4 years ago, Barack Hussein Obama and his vice president at the time, Joe Biden, aka the Democrats, were in office. Now, before I even move forward, let's take a look at what Obama and the Democrats did for Black people when he was in office. Back in 2016, Obama did an interview with my main man, Ta-Nehisi Coates, on reparations. Now, unlike most interviewers who allow Obama to talk in circles and ramble about bullshit, Ta-Nehisi Coates consecutively pressed Obama about reparations. Every single time Obama tried to weasel his way around it, Ta-Nehisi Coates would shut Obama down and ask him the exact same questions that I've been posing today. What policies are you putting into place that will help the Black community out? And for the people at home who think I'm making this up, allow me to read Obama's response to Mr. Coates when he asked him about reparations. Begin quote, I am in being able to mobilize the country around providing a benefit specific to African Americans as a consequence of slavery and Jim Crow, Now, we can debate the justices of that, but I feel pretty confident in that assessment politically. And I think that part of my optimism comes from the belief that we as a people could actually, regardless of all the disadvantages of the past, regardless of the fact that a lot of other folks got a head start in the race, if we were able to make the race fair right now, and end quote. Did you guys just hear that? So Obama said out of his own mouth that despite the disadvantages of the past, regardless of the fact that a lot of other folks, namely every other person except black people, got a head start in the race, if we were able to make the race fair right now, things would be okay for black people. Now, if that isn't the biggest fucking lie I've ever heard in my life, I don't know what is. And not only is that a lie, I can prove that that's a lie. Take a look at this article. This article is appropriately titled, Blacks Will Take Hundreds of Years to Catch Up to White Wealth. It was written by Tanzania Vega on August 9th, 2016, 8:39 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Begin quote. The wealth gap between blacks and whites in America will take hundreds of years to close, if ever. If current trends persist, it will take 228 years for black families to accumulate the same amount of wealth as whites, according to the report released this week from the Corporation of Economic Development and the Institute for Policy Studies. For Latino families, it'll take 84 years. Over the past 30 years, the average household wealth of white families has grown 85% to $656,000, while that of blacks has climbed just 27% to $85,000, and Latinos 69% to $98,000. We're seeing wealth concentrating in fewer and fewer hands, and those hands are overwhelmingly white, said Josh Hoxie, who leads the Project on Opportunity and Taxation at the Institute for Policy Studies. As the number of people of color in the United States increases, so will the wealth gap. By 2043, the year the census expects whites to be the minority in the U.S., the racial wealth gap between blacks and Latino households and white households will double from 500,000 to 1 million, the report said. So what the hell is Obama talking about? He's a goddamn liar, and we just caught him in a lie. That's all he does. There is no way that black people are ever going to be catching up to any white person anytime soon. Even if you make the race fair now, they are not catching up. It is physically impossible. And we also know this is true because I just showed you an article earlier where they already project in 30 years' time the wealth for black people will be zero. So again, what is he talking about? Now, luckily for us, Mr. Coates knows Obama is full of shit, so he hit him with the exact same question that I just said. Begin quote. Coates says, "You think we could catch up?" Feeling pressured, as Obama knows that Coates isn't going to go for that, Obama quickly doubles back and says this. Begin quote. Now, are we going to have suddenly the same number of CEOs, billionaires, etc. as the white community in 10 years? Probably not. Maybe not even in 20 years. But I guarantee you that we would be thriving. We would be succeeding. Again, that's a lie. How the hell are things going to be thriving for black people when they have no access to wealth? Let me ask you guys a serious question at home. Can any person at home enjoy themselves if they can't pay their rent? Can any person at home enjoy themselves or thrive when they can't feed their families because they have no access to fucking wealth? Then Obama goes on to say, and my point has always been, we're so far from that. Why are we even having the abstract conversation when we've got a big fight on our hands just to get strong, universal anti-poverty programs and social programs in place? And we're still fighting to make sure that basic anti-discrimination laws are enforced, not just at the federal level, by the way, but throughout government and throughout private sectors. Now, in case you're not following the narrative here, Ta-Nehisi Coates is giving Obama the business. He's chopping Obama up for not giving black people reparations in this article. And Obama, out of his own mouth, told black America that we are so far from giving black people anything. Why are we even having this abstract conversation? AKA, Why are we still talking about this stupid reparations, especially when we could focus on other things? Obama said this to the very people who got him into office. Obama told you, black man and black woman, that he would rather focus on other people's problems than to help you out. But you know what's funny about this entire ordeal? Obama didn't say that shit to the Holocaust survivors. In fact, Obama gave them $12 million. And on top of that, Obama's administration exclusively put policies into place to protect them. And that's not all, my friends. The Holocaust survivors aren't the only ones who were taken care of by Obama. Back in 2010, the Obama administration passed the Tribal Law Act and the American Recovery Reinvestment Act of 2009, which allocated $510 million for rehabilitation of Native American housing. Meanwhile, Obama did nothing for black people, despite the fact that black America was devastated by the Great Recession. To make this simple, Barack Hussein Obama and the Democratic Party didn't give two shits about black people losing their homes, yet they gave $510 million to Native Americans. And don't even get me started about the LGBT community. Obama and his Democrats passed more laws for them than any other president in history.
Why not target the African American community? Why not say then, this is for you? This is for African Americans. If there was a banking crisis, then you target money for the banks. If there was a national disaster, you target your money for the national for disaster relief.
That's not how America works.
Fuck you, Obama. And let's not forget, Barack Hussein Obama and his Vice President Joe Biden, aka the Democrats, were in office when Sandra Bland was murdered, and he did nothing about it. Let me reiterate for the people in the back. Barack Hussein Obama was president when Sandra Bland was murdered, and he did nothing about it. Barack Hussein Obama was president when Trayvon Martin was murdered, and he did nothing about it. Barack Hussein Obama was president when Freddie Gray was murdered, and he did nothing about it. Barack Hussein Obama was president when Michael Brown was murdered, and he did nothing about it. Barack Hussein Obama was president when Philando Castile was murdered, and he did nothing about it. Barack Hussein Obama and Joe Biden and the Democratic Party allowed 114 people to die under his watch, and he did nothing about it. So yeah, I don't give a damn who you vote for. No Democrat or Republican is going to save you from racism and oppression. If Hillary Clinton would have beaten Trump for presidency, George Floyd would still have been murdered. If Hillary Clinton was in office right now, Joseph Blake would have still gotten shot. And for the people at home who want to refute what I'm saying, please answer this question for me. What did Obama do about the 114 innocent black people that I just mentioned who were killed by the police when he was in office? I'll tell you what he did. Instead of protecting unarmed black people from racist-ass police officers, on May 19th, 2015, Barack Hussein Obama signed a blue alert law to protect police officers. That's right, you heard me correctly. Obama signed a blue alert law to protect police officers instead of protecting black America. And for the record, I want everybody to remember, this is the Democratic Party. So if you think that getting rid of Trump and replacing him with Biden is going to make your problems go away, you are out of your goddamn mind. Now, I don't know if you guys are aware of this or not, but the Democratic Party and the Republican Party's campaigns have both been supported by the Fraternal Order of the Police. Did you know that? And in case that just went over your head and you don't know what the Fraternal Order of the Police is, allow me to enlighten you. The Fraternal Order of the Police, or the FOP for short, is a union run by elderly white police officers who use their collective power to protect violent racist police officers who commit crimes against black people. That's the simplest way I can put it. And if you think I'm making this up, allow me to prove the validity of my claim with a source. This article was published by Ari Shapiro, and it's appropriately entitled The Fraternal Order of Police, a union that stands in the way of police reforms. Now let's scroll down and read what Paul Butler, a law professor at Georgetown University Law Center, has to say about the FOP when he was interviewed. Begin quote from Butler. It's an organization that sometimes engages in collective bargaining with police departments and other times acts as more of a social club. While it's the largest of the police organizations, its membership tends to be not as diverse as many police departments are. And often, even in departments that have many officers of color, it's older white men who are the leaders of the Fraternal Order of Police. So as you just heard right here, the Fraternal Order of Police is a social club that's run by elderly white men. Very interesting. It's not diverse. It's run by elderly white men. So then Shapiro goes on to ask Butler this question. Begin quote. And so, apart from the diversity issue, what is it about their policies that you think makes them a force against positive change? What makes them part of the problem in your view? Butler then responds by stating, begin quote, police unions often stand in the way of reform. They do so with their rhetoric and the protections they win for cops. So in Philadelphia, the president of the Fraternal Order of Police called Black Lives Matter protesters a bunch of rabid animals after a Cleveland cop killed 12-year-old Tamir Rice, who was playing with a toy gun. Another Fraternal Order of Police union head tweeted, act like a thug, you'll be treated like a thug. So police reform is about transparency and accountability. And police unions resist these important goals. They fight to keep disciplinary records of cops secret. So as you can just see, the Fraternal Order of Police is not only racist for stating this shit about Tamir Rice's people and people who were protesting about a cop who shot a 12-year-old kid in the back, but they're also hiding disciplinary records of cops. And they're doing everything in their power to protect these dirty-ass cops who are killing innocent black people. And for anybody at home who doesn't believe that this article is legit, don't worry. I actually have the Fraternal Order of Police on film saying this shit, so that way you can hear it personally, because we all know seeing is believing. So let me play the tape so that way you can hear it out of their mouth.
When you go to work each day, you shouldn't have to worry that a pack of rabid animals will suddenly show up at your home and openly threaten your family, as we saw last week. Pack of rabid animals, pack of rabid animals, pack of rabid animals, pack of rabid animals, pack of rabid animals.
So you guys just heard it. I don't want anybody trying to refute this. Now let's play another tape where they say that they are going to protect all of the police officers, good or bad, right or wrong.
Corporal Owen, as a member of a Fraternal Order of Police, and he's a member in good standing, through our legal plan, we provide the attorney for him to help him get through this process.
You had mentioned that Corporal Owen is in good standing with the FOP. What does that mean? The
good standing goes strictly to the dues and speaks more to the fact that if you're a member of this organization, we support you no matter what the circumstances are with the incident. That is part of being the member, is you are afforded that right.
Pause. Let's rewind that so that way we can hear it again.
If you're a member of this organization, we support you no matter what the circumstances are with the incident. That is part of being the member, is you are afforded that right.
So as you all just heard again, from his own mouth, the Fraternal Order of Police will defend cops even if they are dirty. The Fraternal Order of Police, I'll reiterate, defend cops even if they are dirty. And police wonder why we don't trust them? It's because of the shit like this. Now, I know what you guys are going to be asking next. How are they getting away with this? How is the Fraternal Order of Police able to do this if they're just a union in a club? And I'm going to answer that shortly, but let me continue reading this passage from Shapiro and Butler as it's relevant to the topic at hand. Shapiro then goes on to ask Butler an additional question. Begin quote, if, as you say, the police force itself is more diverse and perhaps more open to change than the Fraternal Order of Police, why hasn't some other organizations been a counter voice that is as powerful or more powerful? Butler then goes on to say, begin quote, many police unions are extremely influential. Some spend millions of dollars a year electing lawmakers and helping to support mayors and district attorneys who support their agenda. Look at that. Look at that shit right there. This is why they're not getting arrested. It's because they're funding the lawmakers, the senators, and the political parties like I just said. Do you need any more proof? I'll reiterate. Many police unions, aka the FOP, are extremely influential. Some spend millions of dollars a year electing lawmakers. They're electing the lawmakers, aka the people in power. They're electing lawmakers and helping to support mayors and district attorneys, lawyers, who support their agenda. For a long time in the United States, the politics around law and order have been get tough on crime. That's certainly the FOP's line, and a lot of politicians have gone along with that. In this moment, that might be starting to change. If you look right here, I actually have the contributions to the federal candidates in 2018, 2017, 2016, and so on and so on and so on. And as you can see here, this is very true. For 2018, they donated $15,500. 74% of that funds went to the Democrats, and 26% of it went to the Republicans. And as you can see, they have a breakdown below. And in 2020, they donated $20,000. 40% of it went to the Democrats, and 60% this time went to the Republicans. Now, why is this important and what relevance does this have, you might ask? The Fraternal Order of Police make charitable donations to the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, or whoever is running the show at the time. And in return, the Democrats and the Republican parties both back them up when things get bad. Racist ass police officers then kill black people. The Fraternal Order of Police protect the racist ass police officers from being prosecuted. The Fraternal Order of Police then turn around and ask the same politicians that they help fund for help when those police officers are getting prosecuted. And the politicians then pass laws to ensure that the Fraternal Order of Police are protected. Hence why police officers rarely get prosecuted for killing unarmed black men. That's why Obama wrote the Blue Shield law into place right around the time Freddie Gray was murdered, and that's why Obama didn't do anything to the police who murdered 114 black people. He couldn't do anything to them because they funded him and his campaign. The same can be said with Trump and the Republican Party. This is why black people should not be voting. This is why black people should not be voting. When you vote, you are essentially surrendering your rights by giving these people permission to think for you, dictate what is socially acceptable for you, and you're also allowing them to kill you in cold blood whenever they see fit. I'm sorry, maybe it's because I'm an extraterrestrial, but where I'm from, I don't need a person to tell me what I can and can't do. I don't know if any of you guys are aware, but the reason that any of these presidents or Trump can get on TV and be racist in plain daylight is because you voted for him. Let me give you an example. If no one at home watched my videos, I wouldn't exist on YouTube. I would disappear tomorrow. The same can be said about Trump. The only reason he's able to do and say what he wants to say on national TV is because you voted for him. You fools. If everyone stopped voting, Trump would not exist.
I mean, he's not saying that we're all rapists.
It only makes common sense. They're sending us not the right people.
I have family members that are involved in this stuff, and they are in a state jail at this moment, and I would love nothing better but for them to be deported.
Mr. Trump has a point. There's no accountability of what they're doing. There's no accountability of what they've done.
I'm Hispanic and I vote for Mr. Trump!
See, you have Mexican Americans right here voting for this motherfucker. I'm not making this up.
He said, Hispanic is in my blood, American is in my heart.
It's got to be good for us, not bad for us.
That's right.
Now, for the sake of conversation today, I'm just going to play a few segments of Trump's racist remarks in case you forgot what he's been saying for the last couple years. Then, I'm going to circle back to my initial premise to prove to you that voting has caused more problems for black people than it's actually helped them.
Trump urged African Americans to give him a chance.
And what do you have to lose? You're living in poverty. Your schools are no good. You have no jobs. 58% of your youth is unemployed. When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you.
they're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. You wouldn't believe how bad these people are. These aren't people. These are animals. And we're taking them out of the country at a level and at a rate that's never happened before. With me, it's freedom of speech, very simple. Like it, don't like it, it's freedom of speech.
Would you be comfortable with your supporters displaying the Confederate battle flag at political events?
You know, it depends on what your definition is, but I am comfortable with freedom of speech.
Do you think that disenfranchised, disaffected 22-year-old Muslim American is less or more likely to turn to ISIS?
Jake, we got to stop the problem. We can talk about it. We can talk about it forever. There's a real problem, and it's called radical Islamic
But are you making
terrorism.
it worse? Is the
Wait a
question.
minute.
There are reports, I got to look at a bunch of studies here that say there's actually no correlation between illegal immigration and crime, and that in fact immigrants actually commit crimes at a lower number.
You're not a baby. Okay, you're not a baby.
I'm not saying there's not a lot of individual
coming
cases.
in are causing tremendous problems. In terms of crime, in terms of murder, in terms of rape.
Why are African Americans still dying at the hands of law enforcement in this country?
And so are white people. So are white people. What a terrible question to ask. So are white people. More white people, by the way. More white people.
Research suggests that black people are about 3 times more likely to be killed by police than white people.
They're coming from all over the world. I'm not just talking about Mexico.
We're talking Central America as well, but you're saying that there is a correlation between...
And you're probably talking about the Middle East, and you're talking about other places. The southern border is a disaster. Congress has 10 days left to pass a bill that will fund our government, protect our homeland, and secure our very dangerous southern border. Now is the time for Congress to show the world that America is committed to ending illegal immigration and putting the ruthless coyotes, cartels, drug dealers, and human traffickers out of business.
Back when he announced his candidacy, the day he announced his candidacy in 2015, he made inflammatory remarks about Mexican immigrants. According to the New York Times, he complained that the 15,000 Haitian immigrants who received visas in 2017 all have AIDS. In that very same meeting, the Times reports, he said that once the 40,000 Nigerian immigrants given visas arrived in the U.S., they would never go back to their huts. The White House denies this report. During the presidential election, Donald Trump referred to a Gold Star mother saying, look at his wife. She was standing there, just standing there. She had nothing to say. Maybe she wasn't allowed to have anything to say, implying that she was being silenced because of the family's Muslim faith. Candidate Trump also went after a U.S. district judge who presided over fraud allegations against Trump University, citing the judge's Mexican heritage.
We're building a wall. He's a Mexican. We're building a wall between here and Mexico. The answer is he is giving us very unfair rulings.
All right, at a White House ceremony very recently honoring Navajo code talkers, the president used a nickname for Senator Elizabeth Warren. Senator Elizabeth Warren that many people may have found offensive.
You were here long before any of us were here, although we have a representative in Congress who they say was here a long time ago. They call her Pocahontas.
All right, early last year, he asked journalist White House correspondent April Ryan if she could help him set up a meeting with the Congressional Black Caucus.
Are you going to include the Congressional Black Caucus and the Congressional
Hispanic
Caucus?
Well, I would. I tell you what, do you want to set up the meeting? Do you want to set up the meeting?
No.
Are they friends of yours?
I'm just a reporter.
No, set up the meeting.
I know some.
And during a presidential debate, he generalized the lives of minority communities.
African Americans, Hispanics are living in hell because it's so dangerous. You walk down the street, you get shot.
Now, for the people at home who are still not convinced in regards to everything that I just showed them tonight, and they still need more proof that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party is dirty, don't worry. I have 2 more examples right here that will be the final nails in the coffin for both parties. Now, in order to tell this story, we gotta go back in time. Back to the Iran hostage crisis. Now, for the people at home who might not be aware of what the Iran hostage crisis is, allow me to elaborate. The story begins in 1951 with Mohammad Mossadegh, an extremely popular and charismatic prime minister of Iran. Mossadegh refused to do further business with a British oil-owned company by the name of Anglo-Iranian when he found out that the company was only paying Iran 16% of its profits and sometimes less. In October 1952, Mossadegh declared Britain an enemy and cut all diplomatic relations. Britain, who was unable to resolve the issue, reached out to the United States for help. And in 1953, the United States stuck their nose in another person's problem and helped them topple Iran's elected prime minister. And they did this under the agreement that they would get a taste of the oil profits in Iran. And who did they replace Mossadegh with, you might ask? Well, the United States replaced him with a man known as the Shah. This was known as Operation Ajax. Now, unlike Mossadegh, the Shah was specifically put into power in order to protect the United States' interest and to ensure that the oil would be distributed to the US and Britain like it once was. Contrary to Mossadegh, the Shah was a brutal dictator that used his military might and secret police known as the Savak to torture, terrorize, and kill people daily. Anyone and everyone who questioned or challenged his ideals were executed on the spot. As time passed, opposition to the Shah grew, and a new religious faction known as the Ayatollah emerged. With the support of the entire country, the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini challenged the Shah and his secret police. Fearing for his life, as he knew he wouldn't be able to take on the entire country, on January 1979, the Shah and his family left Iran to avoid the escalating opposition. This was known as the Iranian Revolution. With the Shah no longer in office, Khomeini established a new government in Islamic Republic. This new government and the masses that supported it had absolutely no love for the United States, as they blamed the majority of their oppression on us. The Ayatollah and the masses staged demonstration after demonstration outside of the US embassies in the Iranian capital of Tehran. Now, after running away with his tail between his legs, the Shah jumped around from country to country until finally he was allowed to come to the United States by President Jimmy Carter. Allowing the Shah to come to the US not only infuriated the Iranian revolutionaries, but it led them to take matters into their own hands. And on November 4th, 1979, 3,000 angry protesters attacked the U.S. embassies in Tehran. The mob took 63 people at the embassy hostage, and later 3 more people were taken hostage at the Iranian Foreign Ministry, bringing the total to 66. Back in the U.S., the hostage crisis spread like wildfire through the newspaper clippings, forcing the American government to take action. Feeling the pressure, President Carter demanded that the hostages be released, but he was ignored. The Ayatollah had one demand and one demand only: return the Shah, and they would release the hostages. Now, instead of complying with their demands, the president said no, as the Shah was their ally. To pressure Iran into submission, and to make things worse, the United States froze all Iranian assets held in the American banks on November 1979. Unfortunately, that did absolutely nothing, as the Ayatollah remained strong. Now, around that time, President Carter was in an election that year with Ronald Reagan, who viciously attacked him for being weak and ineffective during the crisis. Now, get this, when the election day came around, the hostages were still being held in captivity. As a result of this, Reagan destroyed Carter at the polls and became the new president of the United States. By the start of 1981, the Iranian government and the Americans decided to go back to the bargaining table. In exchange for lifting the embargo, Iran agreed to release the American hostages just hours after Ronald Reagan took the oath of office on January 20th, 1981. Now, unbeknownst to most people, around the same time that all of this was happening, Lebanon, a country in the Middle East, was going through a civil war. And how did this happen, you might ask? Well, when Israel became a state in 1948, the United States and the UK helped Jewish immigrants kick out 100,000 Palestinians from their homeland of Palestine. Now, because the Palestinians had no place to go, the majority of them migrated to Lebanon. This exodus contributed to shifting the demographic balance in favor of the Muslim population. And in case you're not aware, the government in Lebanon at the time was Christian. Because the population was now predominantly Muslim, Iran, the same group that was oppressed by the Shah due to Americans' interference, funded a paramilitary organization known as Hezbollah to help the Palestinians and other Muslims overthrow the Christian Western government, as it represented the United States, in favor of the Iranian theocratic model. Now, the clash between the two camps fueled the nation's civil war. Peacekeeping became a multinational task, bringing Western militaries into the war-torn country. In addition, journalists also reported from the region. These people, by virtue of their U.S. and their European citizenship, became the targets for Islamic fundamentalist militias. And just like Iran, the Americans who went on over to Lebanon to stick their nose in other people's business were kidnapped. And for the record, this was the second time since Carter that Americans were kidnapped. Now, what most people don't know is that Ronald Reagan, a Republican and the President of the United States, was not able to come to a favorable legal agreement with the Hezbollah in exchange for the hostages, much like Jimmy Carter before him. One of the biggest foreign policy scandals of the last half century was the Iran-Contra affair. And if you don't know what the Iran-Contra affair is, oh boy, are you in for a wild and wacky ride. To make this simple, the Reagan administration, prodded by CIA Director William Casey and the National Security Council advisor Oliver North, secretly arranged for an arms for hostages deal with Iran. And in case that went over your head, I will reiterate. The Reagan administration, aka the Republicans, illegally sold weapons to Iran. And in return for selling these weapons to Iran, they released the hostages. Now, not only is this illegal, this is the textbook definition of treason.
But wait, there's more.
NSC advisor Oliver North and William Casey, the CIA director, then doubled down and used the money that they received from the weapon sales in Iran to fund yet another illegal venture, a secret plan to support the Contras, a revolutionary group in Nicaragua which opposed the communist Sandinistas. Now, to make this very simple, America, aka the Republicans, didn't like who was in charge in Nicaragua, which were the Sandinistas. And to control what was going on in Central America, they used the money that they were gaining from the illegal weapon sales to fund the Contras in the hopes that the Contras would kill the Sandinistas for them so that way they can take over. This is the exact same thing they did in the Middle East with the Shah. These people keep going into other people's country and screwing them over. And y'all out here voting for them. Y'all out here voting for these people so that way they can go into other people's country and screw them over. Now, it should be noted that this was also highly illegal, as there was a Bolin Amendment in place that Congress had passed from 1982 to 1984 that specifically prohibited the United States support of the Contras. Now, before I go any further, let's just do a real quick recap, as this is a lot of information to cover. Mohammad Mossadegh originally was the Prime Minister of Iran. Now, Mossadegh fell into trouble when he found out that a British-owned oil company by the name of Anglo-Iranian was only paying Iran 16% of its profits and sometimes less. Now, when he confronted the company, they immediately told him that they weren't going to give him any of the money back that they had been stealing or skimming from the top. So to counter this, Mossadegh declared them an enemy and didn't want to do business with them anymore. Which makes sense, because if you were stealing from me too, I wouldn't want to be doing business with your ass either. Now, when Britain realized that they weren't going to get any more money, or weren't going to be able to steal from Iran anymore, they called America, aka the US, and the Carter administration, aka the Democrats at the time, to come into this country in order to kick this guy out of office so that way they can continue to steal the oil from these poor people. That is exactly what happened. I can't make it any easier to understand than that. They kicked this guy out of his own country and put him into prison. And then they put their own dictator in power by the name of the Shah, in order to destabilize the country and to continue to steal the oil that they were already stealing from them. I hope everybody's following me. So once the Shah was in power, he had full discretion to turn up on all those people over there. So with his secret police, known as the Savak, he murdered and killed anybody who questioned his authority and terrorized all of the people of Iran. Now, eventually, as time passed, a religious group by the name of the Ayatollah rose up with everybody in the country, and with their might, they outranked and outnumbered the Savak, aka the secret police, and the Shah. Now, fearing for his life, the Shah immediately bounced from country to hide because he knew he was going to get killed by these revolutionaries until he finally received shelter in the United States. Now, once the Ayatollah realized that the Shah was hiding in the United States and the United States once again was bailing this guy out, the Ayatollah immediately attacked the embassy in Iran and kidnapped 66 hostages and then wanted to barter them in exchange for the Shah. And instead of complying with their demands, Carter said no, and the hostages ended up staying over there for 444 days. Now, when Reagan got into office, there was a civil war going on in the Middle East, or Lebanon. And the reason that there was a civil war going on over there in Lebanon was because the Americans, aka the Democrats and the Republicans, aka white supremacy, did what they always do. They stuck their nose in these people's business. And they did this by kicking out the Palestinians from their own homeland and awarded it to Jewish people. Now, this is almost relatively similar to what they did to the Native Americans, black people, and everyone else who wasn't white. Europeans, aka the Democrats and the Republicans, go to other people's land, steal their land, take their land, and force them off of their land. And then they have the audacity to call them a terrorist when they do these heinous and atrocious things.
Jake, we got to stop the problem. We can talk about it. We can talk about it forever. There's a real problem, and it's called radical Islamic
but are you making
terrorism.
It worse?
Wait a minute.
No, motherfucker, y'all the problem. Now, I digress. Let's get back to the story. Now, because the Middle East and Lebanon was tired of all this Western colonialism, and they were tired of the Americans interfering with their problems, they decided to kidnap any American who stepped foot on their land. And they did this with the hope that they would be able to barter these people over for tangible items. Unbeknownst to the American people, Oliver North, William Casey, and Ronald Reagan all committed treason by selling illegal firearms, weapons, and missiles to the Iranian government. And they did this in exchange for the hostages. Now, I know what you all are thinking. Why the hell did I spend 20 minutes talking about the Middle East? And what relevance does this have with black people, you might ask? Well, my friends, I'll tell you. To ensure that the Contras were able to overthrow the Sandinistas for Ronald Reagan and the CIA, the Reagan administration illegally hired Oscar Blandón and Norwin Meneses to smuggle cocaine to the San Francisco Bay Area. The drug ring sold tons of cocaine to the Crips and Blood street gangs of Los Angeles and funneled millions of dollars in drug profits to the Latin American guerrilla army run by the United States Central Intelligence Agency. This drug ring opened the first pipeline between Colombia's cocaine cartels and the black neighborhoods of Los Angeles, and as a result, the cocaine that flooded in helped spark a crack explosion in urban America. So let's recap, shall we? To ensure that the Contras had enough money to buy weapons and to overthrow the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, the CIA and the Reagan administration brought cocaine to LA and spread it through the black community to fund their own agenda in Central America. These people, aka the Republicans, caused the crack epidemic that killed millions of black people. And for the people at home who still don't believe what I'm saying, don't worry, I got you. All the proof one needs for this entire story is Gary Webb. It's Gary Webb. It's Gary Webb. Now, let's go on Wikipedia and read what they had to say about Gary Webb. Webb is best known for his Dark Alliance series, which appeared in the Mercury News in 1996. The series examined the origins of the crack cocaine trade in Los Angeles and claimed that members of the anti-communist Contra rebels in Nicaragua had played a major role in creating the trade, using cocaine profits to support their struggle. It also suggested that the Contras may have acted with the knowledge and protection of the Central Intelligence Agency. The series provoked outrage, particularly in the Los Angeles African American community, and led to 4 major investigations of its charges. So as you all just heard here, Gary Webb, an investigative journalist, was the first person to crack the case and to prove that the CIA and Ronald Reagan and all of those politicians were corrupt as fuck. But don't worry, I know there's going to be people at home who are going to want to refute this, so let's do what I always do. Let me show you the source and the news clippings, as well as the video confirmation to prove all of the things that I'm saying today.
The Contras were a group battling the Cuban-backed Sandinistas, a communist group who had seized power in 1979. Reagan called the Contras the moral equivalent of our founding fathers. But much of the Contras' funding came from the cocaine trade. The president told his national security advisor, Robert McFarland, to help the Contras anyway, regardless of the cost. McFarlane found opportunity in Iran. In 1985, an Iranian-backed terrorist group held 7 American hostages in Lebanon. Reagan insisted his advisors find a way to bring the hostages home, saying, "I want you to do whatever you have to do to help these people keep body and soul together." So with permission from Reagan, McFarlane made a deal. The U.S. would give Iran weapons, and Iran would broker the release of the hostages. This happened even though Reagan publicly insisted he would not negotiate with terrorists, and despite the fact that there was a trade embargo with Iran. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. The deal with Iran didn't just secretly secure the release of the hostages in exchange for weapons. There was money involved. While $30 million had been allocated for the weapons, the CIA funneled a portion of that money to the Contras in Nicaragua, the group Reagan supported in their guerrilla fight against the Sandinista government. In 1986, the Lebanese newspaper Al-Shara reported the arms deal, and everything began to unravel. That prompted an investigation by the U.S. Attorney General, who discovered that only $12 million of the $30 million actually went toward weapons for Iran. The rest of the money was sent to the Contras in Nicaragua. The revelations were explosive. Reagan denied the allegations that he had negotiated with terrorists, but Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North came forward and acknowledged that he diverted funds to the Contras. North also said Reagan knew about it.
Pause. See? I'm not making this up. Reagan knew about it. Reagan knew about it. He knew what was going on. He's dirty.
North's testimony would inspire the press and Congress to launch investigations against Reagan for the rest of his presidency. Texas Senator John Tower led the investigation into the scandal. The Tower Commission determined it was Reagan's lack of oversight that allowed Iran-Contra to happen, but did not implicate Reagan directly. Reagan was never charged, but McFarlane, Oliver North, 4 CIA officers, 5 government contractors, and Reagan's national security advisor, John Poindexter, were all found guilty. Yet, speculation about Reagan's involvement lingered on. Press investigations would go on for years to follow. While Reagan's image suffered a bit, he still left office with one of the highest approval ratings of any president in U.S. history.
Now, do you guys see how corrupt this system is? Not only did they have eyewitness testimony from Oliver North, aka Ronald Reagan's right-hand man, stating that Reagan knew about all of the operations that were going on, but he still didn't get convicted of treason when he broke the Bolin Amendment? Why didn't Ronald Reagan go to jail from committing treason and selling weapons of mass destruction to Iran if Iran was a terrorist? And in case most people don't know this, all of the individuals who were supposed to be convicted of treason, they were not convicted at all. In fact, when George W. Bush got into office, he pardoned every last one of them. Now let's take a look at Gary Webb on Dateline and see what he has to say about the whole situation.
Men who were working for the CIA's army were responsible for bringing all that cocaine into Los Angeles that sparked the crack epidemic.
The CIA's army, Webb says, were the Contras, the anti-communist rebels fighting the government of Nicaragua back in the 1980s, an army founded and funded by the CIA. Webb wrote that some Contra supporters smuggled cocaine to America to raise money for their cause.
The CIA has been bringing drugs into this country.
As then CIA Director John Deutsch discovered, it's an accusation that rings true for many, especially for some in the African-American community. And Webb's story has taken on a life of its own.
And Gary,
on the talk show circuit and the internet, some have even gone beyond Webb's charges to accuse the CIA of conspiring to target young African Americans.
Was the CIA willing to poison our cities and crack cocaine?
On the basis of what you learned, do you believe that there was a conscious decision, a meeting where someone sat down and said, we're going to poison the youth of Black America, and here's how we're going to do it?
These guys were looking to raise money, and I don't think it mattered to them where they did it. They just went where they could raise the money.
Gary Webb says his stories were largely based on the testimony of a drug dealer with Contra connections who became a U.S. government witness. And many Americans do seem willing to believe that their own government could have been involved in drug smuggling. So was the U.S. government involved in any way? Dateline decided to take a second look. Crack use spread like wildfire in the early 1980s. And in Los Angeles, a drug dealer known as Freeway Ricky Ross was in the middle of it. Prosecutors called Ross the Walmart of crack. He made millions in the early 80s dealing to Los Angeles street gangs. Police say he was among the first to take expensive cocaine powder and cook it into low-cost, highly addictive crack, then distribute it through the gangs. Webb says Freeway Ricky helped trigger an epidemic of human misery.
It's destroyed our community. All the black men are in prison, most of us.
Police in Los Angeles say he virtually cornered the crack market, thanks to a steady supply of cheap cocaine. A pipeline so good that Ross was able to introduce crack to other cities, using his gang contacts, and to make himself, he says, a very rich man. Rick Ross's drug supplier did have connections to the Contras.
Pause. See? I told you they were all connected.
Rick Ross's drug supplier did have connections to the Contras. Dateline has been able to confirm that from former Contra leader Eden Pastora. And Pastora admits he received some aid from that drug supplier. Now retired, Dewey Claridge was the CIA's man in charge of Central America in the early 80s. He insists the agency had nothing to do with any drug trafficking or with any cover-up.
Oh, don't give me the conspiracy bullshit. Come on, you're a more intelligent man than that. Well, come on. I mean, come on. There has never been a conspiracy in this country.
Pause. Listen to this lying motherfucker. There's never been a conspiracy in this country. There's never been a conspiracy in this country. Yo lying ass. Why don't you say that to William Casey, who literally went on record and said that we'll know that our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false?
Never. But in the mid-1980s, there was a high-level White House conspiracy called Iran-Contra. Whatever you believe, Gary Webb's stories have revived interest in an issue that's been simmering since Ronald Reagan was at the White House. Were U.S. government officials aware of drug smuggling in and around the Contra movement? And did they simply choose to ignore it? One U.S. senator says, absolutely.
There's no question in my mind there is a complicity in the flow of drugs into this country, period.
A Senate investigation led by John Kerry of Massachusetts found that individuals who provided support for the Contras were involved in drug trafficking, and that one or another agency of the U.S. government had information regarding the involvement, either while it was occurring or immediately thereafter. Incredibly, according to Senator Kerry, smugglers even used the U.S. government's own airlift operation at El Salvador's Ilopango airport to get cocaine back across the American border. This drug enforcement agent patrolled that same airport in the mid-80s.
It was just nonstop traffic coming and going, and nobody ever inspected their planes or their cargo or whatever.
Cele Castillo told Dateline he observed rampant drug smuggling at that airport.
Well, what we had was we had Contra pilots flying out of Ilopango smuggling drugs into the U.S., cocaine specifically.
He claims the smuggling was so open it had to be condoned by the U.S. government. Castillo says planes would arrive filled with supplies for the Contras, then leave carrying cocaine for America, bound for military airfields in Florida and Texas, offloaded out of sight of the law, then shipped to California and other points in the U.S. And there's more. Castillo says when he reported all of this to his bosses at the DEA, he was told to ignore it.
So you were told point blank? Point blank, stay away from it. It's a covert operation being run by the White House.
As for the CIA, it's denied ever aiding or condoning drug smuggling.
Reports were reaching the highest councils of our government, in the White House and in the Justice Department. There is no question of that. I can document that.
The White House and Justice Department disputed Kerry's report at the time, but he still believes some government officials turned a blind eye towards drug dealing in the mid-1980s.
See? And black people are out here voting for these people. Black people are out here voting for these people who put cocaine into their neighborhoods and then turned around and locked them up for it. Now let's listen to Freeway Ricky Ross and hear what he has to say about the crack epidemic.
You were a source for the journalist Gary Webb, who claimed that Blandon was funneling cocaine money to the Contras, either with the help of the CIA or with a kind of like turn the other tongue-in-cheek attitude from the CIA. Do you stand by Webb's reporting?
Since Gary's past, the CIA has come out and admitted that they were working with known drug traffickers. So now it's no longer this myth or this perception that it may have happened or it may not have happened. It absolutely happened. The government admitted it. They put it in their own report.
Sometimes it spins off into theories like, oh, the government purposely created the crack epidemic in LA. You wouldn't go that far, would you?
It doesn't matter if they purposely planned on doing that. What wound up happening is it flooded the ghettos of America. 600,000 black men are in prison right now for nonviolent crimes. Our prison industry has boomed, so that happened. Why did it happen? Was it personally targeted? We may never know. Oliver North and those guys were given a pardon before they ever went to trial, so the evidence never came out.
And in case you don't realize how serious the crack epidemic was in LA, allow me to show you.
As early as 1981, reports of the alleged crack epidemic began surfacing in Los Angeles. Crack rock was cheaper, purer, and easier to get than traditional cocaine, and it took lower-income areas by storm. By 1983, the epidemic had taken hold of the city, turning communities into war zones. And soon, crack became a national crisis.
Today, there's a new epidemic. Smokable cocaine, otherwise known as crack. It is an uncontrolled fire.
Reagan's Anti-Drug Abuse Act imposed harsher sentences on crack than traditional cocaine use, leading to a decades-long debate that the law was unfairly targeting minorities and lower-income neighborhoods who couldn't afford the more expensive cocaine powder. Incarcerations in LA skyrocketed. By 1995, the California Department of Corrections increased its black and Latino inmates from 21,476 to 88,376, more than a 400% increase. This led to broken families, an overblown foster care system, increased violence, and a growing skid row that crippled the nation.
Now let's skip ahead a bit to everybody's favorite savior, Joe Biden. Now, what most people don't know is that after the Reagan administration brought cocaine to the African American community and took zero responsibility for it, Joe Biden came along and created the crime bill to lock black people up for the shit that he and his racist buddies created. And before I even dive into Biden's dubious pasts, let me state this for the record. In my honest opinion, in some ways, Joe Biden is even worse than Trump. Yes, I said it. Joe Biden is worse than Trump, as he is the architect for the various crime bills that have led to the mass incarceration and the mass growth in the prison industry. This man has single-handedly put more black people away than any other president in the United States history. And for the people at home who don't know what the crime bill is, allow me to read one of my favorite articles, appropriately titled, 3 Ways the 1994 Crime Bill Continues to Hurt Communities of Color. It was published by Rania Shannon on May 10th, 2019 at 9:03 a.m. Begin quote. As previous CAP work has pointed out, the bill contributed to ongoing rampant police misconduct and racial profiling by deploying hundreds of thousands of officers into neighborhoods of color, and it jeopardized re-entry for returning people of color by eliminating their Pell Grant eligibility while in prison. The bill also expanded the use of the death penalty, imposed mandatory life sentences for individuals with 3 or more felony convictions, and levied harsh new penalties for justice-involved youth. Many of these harmful provisions remain in effect today and continue to target and destabilize communities of color. Here are 3 ways that the 1994 crime bill continues to undermine the safety and well-being of communities of color. 1. Authorize the death penalty for 60 new federal offenses. Known as the direct descendant of lynching, the death penalty has always targeted and terrorized black and Latino communities. The crime bill's Federal Death Penalty Act permitted the use of the death penalty for 60 new federal offenses, including certain drug offenses not related to homicide. So as you just heard here, they could kill you for having drugs. They could administer and kill your ass for having drugs.
1, the death penalty. It provides 53 death penalty offenses. Weak as can be, you know? We do everything but hang people for jaywalking.
In the 5 years following the bill's passage, 74% of the defendants with death penalty recommendations from the federal prosecutors were people of color. Notably, 44% were black and 21% were Hispanic. So they get in the Hispanic community too. And they ass out here voting for Trump. And I'm pretty sure they're going to be out here voting for Biden too. And Biden's the man who went around and killed all of their brothers, their cousins, their sisters, and all of their family members. But I digress. Let's get back to the quote. Racial disparities in capital punishment persist to this day. While black and Hispanic people represent just 31% of the United States population, they represent 53% of the death row inmates at 41.9% and 11.3% respectively. Furthermore, the death penalty is more likely to be recommended when the victim of the crime is white rather than black, despite the fact that black men are the most likely victims of homicide. So you just heard right here, if a black person kills a white person, you are getting the death penalty. But if a black person gets killed by a white person, they're not getting the death penalty. So as you see right here, this bullshit ass law that Biden put into place is screwing black people over. Last year, the Trump administration called upon federal prosecutors to pursue the death penalty in cases dealing in extremely large quantities of drugs. If this directive survives litigation, it is expected to worsen racial disparities in the application of the death penalty, as black people are far more likely than white people to be arrested, charged, convicted, and incarcerated for drug crimes, even though they use and sell drugs at a similar rate. 2. Impose mandatory life sentences for individuals with 3 or more felony convictions. The crime bill implemented a rash of new 3-strike laws that impose automatic life sentences for people convicted of certain felony offenses if they already have 2 convictions on their record. Dozens of states followed suit and enacted the 3-strike laws, resulting in a ballooning of the incarceration rate in certain states, especially for blacks and Latino Americans. Imposing life sentences simply because an individual has a criminal record disproportionately targets people of color who are more likely to have a record in the first place because of the unequal contact with the police and the justice system. Harsh collateral consequences limit employment opportunities for returning people, especially people of color, and increase the likelihood of recidivism. The crime bill's 3-strike provision sent thousands of Americans to prison for life based on previous offenses for minor crimes such as stealing loose change from a parked car. In 2016, 78.5% of the Americans serving life sentences in federal prison were people of color. So as you just heard right here, if you had a pre-existing crime and maybe you got into a fight or you hurt somebody, but later down the line, you stole loose change from a parked car, you are going to jail for life. This is the law that Joe Biden helped to write, and you are going to vote for this man and put him in office? You got to be crazy. You got to be crazy. You got to be crazy. Now let's continue. Some states have recognized the damage and the disproportionate effects that the 3-strike sentences have on communities of color, especially black communities, and have undergone major reform efforts. In California, for instance, black people were 12 times more likely than white people to be incarcerated under the 3-strikes law until the state passed the 3-strike Reform Act of 2012. This act amended the law to require one's 3rd strike to be a series of violent felonies and allowed those currently serving the 3-strike sentence to petition the courts for a reduction of their term. However, 28 states still have a 3-strike sentences on the books. In Maryland, Mississippi, and Louisiana, black people alone constitute approximately 3/4 of those sentenced to life in prison, while the federal government recently replaced its mandatory life sentence with a 25-year minimum sentence. It neglected to apply this change retroactively, meaning that hundreds of Americans will die in prison as a result of the three-strike law. So this means you might have hundreds of people in prison getting ready to die because maybe they stole a box of cereal for their family members because they were broke and couldn't find a job after they got out of prison the first time around. So we are going to put people to death for stealing and trying to feed their family because the system wouldn't give them a job. Thanks a lot, Joe Biden. That makes a lot of sense. 3. Levied harsh new penalties for justice-involved youth. The crime bill also expanded the school-to-prison pipeline and increased racial disparities in the juvenile justice involvement by creating draconian penalties for so-called super predators, low-income children of color, especially black children, who are convicted of multiple crimes. Among other things, the crime bill allowed prosecutors to charge 13-year-old children as adults for certain crimes. This is so awful. I'm sorry, I just had to stop. This bill allows them to charge 13-year-old children as adults for certain crimes. And this is who you guys are voting for? Do you know how many black kids probably went to prison at 13 years old? This is seriously the most racist bill I have ever seen in my life. I'm sorry, y'all calling Trump racist? This guy has Trump faded. Faded. As a result, today, 2/3 of Americans who were sentenced to life in prison as juveniles are black. No shit, Sherlock. Juveniles of color also constitute a majority of cases that are transferred to adult criminal court, regardless of offense category. Additionally, the bill included an increase in funding for school resource officers, SROs. These school-based licensed police officers can make arrests and are sometimes armed, depending on local jurisdictions. This increase exacerbated the school-to-prison pipeline for black children, as SROs are twice as likely to discipline black students compared with white students. The bill also called for sentencing enhancements for youth who are convicted of certain offenses and believed to be associated with gangs. However, while white youth represent a significant portion of self-identified gang members at 40%, law enforcement report that more than 90% of gang members are people of color. As a result, police and prosecutors are more likely to target people of color for suspected gang association. Whew, this is one of the worst bills I have ever seen in the history of my life. I'm sorry, but Trump looks like fucking Mother Teresa now in comparison to this guy. For the people at home who still don't believe me, allow me to prove the validity of my claim. Take a look at Joe Biden and what he thinks about black people.
Take back the streets. It doesn't matter whether or not the person that is accosting your son or daughter or my son or daughter, my wife, your husband, my mother, your parents. It doesn't matter whether or not they were deprived as a youth. It doesn't matter or not whether or not they had no background that enabled them to become socialized into the fabric of society. It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons. So I don't want to ask what made them do this. They must be taken off the street. That's number one. There's a consensus on that. Unless we do something about that cadre of young people, tens of thousands of them, born out of wedlock, without parents, without supervision, without any structure, without any conscience developing, because they literally, I yield myself 3 more minutes, because they literally have not been socialized. They literally have not had an opportunity. We should focus on them now. If we don't, they will, or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now. And Madam President, we have predators on our streets that society has, in fact, in part because of its neglect, created. Again, it does not mean because we created them that we somehow forgive them or do not take them out of society to protect my family and yours from them. They are beyond the pale, many of those people. beyond the pale. And it's a sad commentary on society. We have no choice but to take them out of society. And the truth is, we don't very well know how to rehabilitate them at that point. That's the sad truth. I'm the guy that said, rehabilitation, when it occurs, we don't understand it and notice it. And even when we notice it and we know it occurs, we don't know why. So you cannot make rehabilitation a condition for release. That's why in our system, the federal system, you serve 85% of your time. It's a shame, but we don't know how to rehabilitate. But there is a consensus, and I will cease. A, we must make the streets safer. I don't care why someone is a malfactor in society. I don't care why someone is antisocial. I don't care why they become a sociopath. We have an obligation to cordon them off from the rest of society, try to help them, try to change their behavior. That's why we do in this bill. We have drug treatment and we have other treatments to try to deal with it. But they are in jail, away from my mother, your husband, our families. But we would be absolutely stupid as a society if we didn't recognize the condition that nurtured those folks still exist. And we must deal with that.
And by the way, you know, I sit on the stand and it get hot. I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight and then watch the hair come back up again. They'd look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
Even call centers, which rushed overseas in the hundreds of thousands. How many times you get the call? I'd like to talk to you about your credit card.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. They're going to put you all back in chains. If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
I think the two-party system, although my Democratic colleagues don't like me saying this, I think the two-party system is good for the South and good for the Negro, good for the black in the South. Other than the fact that they still call me boy, I think they've changed their mind a little bit.
30 seconds or less. What kind of a chance would a northeastern liberal like Joe Biden stand in the South if you were running in Democratic primaries against Southerners like Mark Warner and John Edwards?
Better than anybody else. And you don't know my state. My state was a slave state. My state is a border state. My state is the 8th largest black population in the country.
So as you guys all just heard here, Joe Biden is just as much of a racist as Donald Trump. Now, in closing, I want to say that the smartest thing that black people could do at this particular point in the game is to divest from all political parties. Let me rephrase that or reiterate that. I want all black people at this particular point in the game to completely remove themselves from both political parties. Black people then need to create their own political unions where black votes are merged and locked down together. From there, black people can then barter those votes for tangible items or concessions and opportunities from the leading party candidates. That is the only way that black people will be able to save themselves at this point in the game, as neither party gives two craps about black people. In closing, I just want to play one last video from Joe Biden when he was asked about reparations and what he intended to do for black people if he got into office.
Vice President Biden, do you support reparations?
Look, I mean, since I haven't spoken on this, got a chance. Number one, the reason we're the country we are is because of immigration. We've been able to cherry pick the best from every single continent. The people who come here have determination, resilience. They are ready to stand up and work like the devil. We have 24 out of every 100 children in our school today is Hispanic. The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is not only stupid and immoral, but it's bad for America. They are the future of America, and we should invest in them. Everybody will benefit from it, every single American, and you should get used to it. This is a nation of immigrants. That's who we are. That's why we're who we are. That's what makes us different, and we should invest in them.
Thank you, Mr. Biden. Senator Klobuchar, you had your hand up.